Single speed bikes, they are awesome and I want one. So I'm gonna build one and use it as an excuse to show you guys how you can build one yourselves. Also, we get loads of questions here on GCN with people asking maintenance questions about single speed bikes and how they can do their conversions. So it seems like the perfect opportunity to do that. But before I start this project, some of you might be asking, why would you build a single speed bike? They don't even have any gears. Well, I mean, like, they have one gear. First up, they just look really, really cool. On a single speed bike, you strip away all but the most essential components that would otherwise clutter up the frame, and this gives a really clean aesthetic to the whole bike. And this also makes them really functional as well. So they're ideal for everyday use and commuting and riding around town. By stripping away loads of components, you make the bike lighter, but there's also less to go wrong. They're much more rugged and much more reliable. You think about things like derailleurs, they can often bend or break in a crash, but single speeds, they can stand up to much more punishment. But although a single speed drivetrain is more mechanically efficient, it might not be the most efficient on you if you have to ride up a mountain. So it is something to factor in if you do happen to live up a mountain. A single speed bike might not be the best option. But in terms of commuting and day-to-day use, they can be cheaper to run as well because, well, there's less components, a more simple system and less things to sort of wear out. Anyway, let's get this project underway. I need to find a frame, and the first word on single speed bikes is chain tension. Actually, that's 2 words. Anyway, chain tension is absolutely key. And this is because you don't have a derailleur on a single speed bike to tension the chain for you. That's one of its jobs, not just changing gear, but to tension the chain. So if you buy a brand new single speed bike, or if you have a track bike, it will have horizontal dropouts for the rear wheel. And these are there so that you can move the rear wheel and pull it against the chain to tension the chain and develop tension that way, and then tighten the wheel in the horizontal dropout. This is different from a normal road dropout, which tends to be kind of vertical and the wheel just slots into it. But you don't need necessarily a bike that has horizontal dropouts or a frame that has horizontal dropouts to do a single speed conversion. There are ways around it. So you can fit a chain tensioner to the rear stay, and that will kind of act as sort of a little weird derailleur that will give tension to the chain, or you can fit eccentric hubs either to the rear wheel or to the bottom bracket. But we're gonna hopefully cross those bridges when I get to them, and I might not have to do that because I've got a plan. So I'm gonna try and use a frame that has horizontal dropouts. And the frame I'm going to use is one that you've probably seen before. So I'm going to use the P1 Cervelo from my budget time trial build. So I did love building this into this time trial beast on a budget, but I do really want to try and build it into a single speed bike now. So I hope you're not too upset that I'm going to, take off the things I've done to it. Because one of the other things is when I was actually building this up and it had no cables on it at one point, I just thought it looked awesome and such a clean look with none of the bits on it and just such a really nice form to the frame. So I think that'll be accentuated once we turn it into a single speed. I'm going to take the rear wheel out and show you the dropouts. Tell you what, I mean, it would help if I actually put it into the smallest sprocket, wouldn't it? Oh, I'll tell you what, this is the world's slowest wheel change, isn't it? So you can see now, this dropout is like a track dropout. It's horizontal, and this is something that you find on quite a few time trial bikes, actually. So, that can be something useful if you're wanting to do a single speed conversion. But this isn't the longest horizontal dropout in the world, and if it was a dedicated track bike, you'd find that this horizontal dropout would probably be another, well, at least 1 centimetre longer than it is there. So that might actually cause me some problems when I do go to tension the chain. It might not be long enough, but we'll see. My plan is to cross that bridge when I come to it. I'm gonna try and build this and use the horizontal dropout without using a chain tensioner or an eccentric hub, but if I do need to use those, the option's there. Now, one of the main things you need to decide if you're doing a single speed conversion or build is whether you go fixed gear or single speed. Now, many of you will know exactly what this means, but for the few of you that might not know what that means, a fixed gear bike means that when the wheels turn, the cranks also always turn. This is the setup that you have on a track bike or on the red hook bikes that you may have seen on the channel, or at the rad race as well, a fixie bike as it's also known. On a single speed bike, that rear wheel is free. It's disconnected via a ratchet, so it means that you can freewheel. You can stop pedaling on a descent and the wheels will spin, but you don't have to turn your legs. Now, the next big sort of decision you need to make is on the rear wheel and how you're going to go about converting it. One of the big differences between a road frame like this and converting that into a single speed bike and a dedicated single speed or fixie bike or track bike is the spacing between the dropouts at the rear. So on a track bike, that distance is usually 110 millimeters as standard. But on a road bike, because you have to make room for the cassette, it's 130. So it's quite a bit wider. So that means you can't just bang in a normal track wheel, you have to do something else. So one of the options that you can do, and it's probably the easiest and cheapest option, is to take an existing road wheel, perhaps the one that's already on the bike, take off the cassette and put on kind of a special single sprocket onto the back, and then space that with spacers on the free hub body so that the chain line is right with the front chain ring. And you can do this, but I don't think it's the best way to do it. Like I say, it's the most simple and probably the cheapest, but it's not the best way. And I want to do a really good job with this and make a really good bike. So I don't think I'm going to do that particular option. What I'm going to do is get a special wheel, which has something in it called a flip-flop hub. Now, the idea behind a flip-flop hub, it's like a tongue twister, is that you can have a single speed bike and a fixed gear bike in one. One side of the hub is a fixed gear bike, and one side of the hub, on the other side of the wheel, is single speed, and you have a sprocket on each side. And simply, if you want to switch between it being a fixie or a single speed, you take the wheel out, flip it round, put it back in the other way, and then you have the best of both worlds. I'd quite like to try out riding a fixie bike out on the roads and, you know, commuting with it and seeing what that's like. So, but if I decide I don't like it, I've got the option to just turn it into a single speed. So for me, that seems like a cool thing to try. But this then creates other potential, well, things to think about. So if I want a flip-flop hub in my rear wheel, I've got to then either buy a wheel that has a flip-flop hub, and I keep saying flip-flop hub, I've got to buy a wheel that's got one installed into it, or I could buy rims, buy spokes, buy a dedicated flip-flop hub and build up a wheel, which I think would be something that would be pretty cool to do. I've not done that before, but I think that would be a cool thing to show you guys. So what I'm going to do is create a poll in the GCN app for you to vote on. Would you like me to just, you know, be done with it, buy a wheel that's pre-built, or would you like to see me build one and show you how to build a flip-flop hub rear wheel? My thinking is, and this is one of the great things about the app, it gives us the option to ask you guys questions like this, and it becomes interactive, and then we can kind of tailor content for you and make things that hopefully you know you'd rather watch or want to watch. So get involved in the app and cast your vote. So other jobs that I need to do are, well, take all the derailleurs off and stuff. That's quite easy, and well, I think I'll find that quite therapeutic. And then also think about the chain set. So as a budget option, what you can do is remove your inner chain ring and use the crankset that's already on your bike, but then take the outer chain ring and then move that as your single chain ring into the position of the inner chain ring. So at the moment, you'll see the chain ring is fixed on the outside here, this outer chain ring. But what we'd do is we'd take that chain ring off, put it into the inner position and affix it back into place with some slightly shorter bolts. So some people doing single speed conversions, what they do is they simply buy some smaller bolts. But you'll probably also want a smaller chain ring as well, because that's a 52, or that's a 50, well, it's a 53 at the moment, and well, I think, to be honest, I don't want a 53. There's a lot of hills around here and I'm only going to have one gear, so I'll get a smaller chainring. But what is a slightly better thing to do is to actually have a dedicated track bike chain set. And the reason for this is that they're designed specifically to be run with single speed chains in single speed configurations, less likely to drop your chain. They're also a lot stiffer as well usually than just a standard road chain set. And it's all to do with chain line. Chain line is incredibly important when you're setting up just a single gear with no derailleurs. And in terms of getting the chain line right, that's why you would take that chain ring off and put it into the inner position. It helps you optimize the chain line. And it is actually one of the slight advantages of that sort of trick of taking off the hub, putting on a single gear onto an old free hub and using spacers, because it means you can actually really tweak the exact chain line and the position of that single cog on the free hub body. Gives you a lot of options to get that chain line absolutely straight and spot on. Something else is the brakes. Now these are like OEM brakes on this bike, and I've actually found they work pretty well. I've serviced them and given them a clean, and I'm pretty happy with them. So to be honest, I don't see any reason to change them. They were fine when I built it up and rode it as a TT bike. One of the things is that on fixie bikes and track bikes, like red hook bikes, you won't see any brakes, and that's because they use the fixed gear as a brake. By backpedaling, you can skid the rear wheel and brake. Now, for riding on a velodrome or doing red hook, this is okay, I guess. But if you actually want to use a bike in the real world, then I definitely recommend having brakes. There's also a legal implication as well. I mean, there have been stories in the news where, and I think it's irresponsible, riders have ridden fixed gear bikes where they've not had actual braking mechanisms on just the actual fixed gear itself, and they've had an accident, and then in the eyes of the law they've been culpable for that accident even if it wasn't their fault, because their bike wasn't fitted with a braking system. So for the real world, I'm going to keep both these brakes on here even if it is set up fixed. So the plan for this, well, bike is to create a video series for you where, we do several videos exploring different things, such as how to calculate the right gear ratios on your single speed bike, and how to, well, build a wheel with a flip-flop hub. If that's what you want to see, then we could do that as well, and then build this bike and then hopefully do something with it. So I've got to get shopping first and get a load of bits. I've got a shopping list, need to buy sprockets. I'm going to get a chain set, although I'm going to have a look in my bits box because I'm pretty sure I've got a track chain set that I could potentially use lying in there. Drop bars. Oh, got a set of these, so I think I might just use these and bang them straight on. They're nice and silver, they match the frame, which is pretty cool. And get that, and I've got to order some brake levers. So the brake levers that you're going to use, they're not ones with integrated STI shifters. They're much cheaper because all they have to do, they don't change gear, single speed. All they have to do is actuate the brakes. So I've got to order those, and I've got to order some tyres as well. The tyres I'm going to put on this bike are going to be bomb-proof, like loads of puncture protection, ideal for an urban environment and just long-term fit and forget use. But one thing I did learn from the TT build is that this frame doesn't have the most tyre clearance. So 25mm tyres do not fit in this frame. And that's something that's worth factoring in if you are, doing this project yourself on an old frame. It's amazing to think this is I still see this as a modern bike. It's only sort of just over 10 years old, but 10 years ago, 23 was considered like massive tyre clearance because everyone was running 19s. So if you had a frame with 23 like this, at the time it was like, whoa, you like doing gravel and like cyclocross on that bike as well, dude? Because people who are into that kind of thing say dude. But anyway, yeah, so I need to get, 23 is my limit on tyres, but something bomb-proof on there. Something interesting as well is like, when you take off the front mech, as I'm doing now, there you go, is you can see you've got the front mech mount here, which is, brazed onto the frame. Now, what some people do is they do actually just completely remove these and take them off, file them down and repaint the area, as it does create like a really clean look. I'm gonna leave that on there so that Well, if ever you did want to change it back into a bike with gears, you've got the option. Bye-bye TT bike. It's quite sad actually, but I mean, it already is starting to look really clean and nice. And I do think this will look absolutely incredible as a single speed bike. I think it'll be really cool. So I can't wait to get it done. But if you've got any suggestions of particular components for things like chain sets, or wheels, or particular flip-flop hubs, if you've got experience with things that you think would be really good, or if you've got any questions as well, just let us know in the comments down below this video, as you know, it's really great getting you guys involved in this kind of stuff. So yeah, I hope you look forward to it too, and let us know the kind of things that you'd like to see from this series, and I'll crack on. I'm gonna get on the internet now and get shopping as well for all those other bits I need. So next week, we'll do some more. I might even build that wheel next week if you decide in the app that that's what you want to see. So yeah, see you later.